this is clearly a tightening of China's state control over the entire EV market. So just how bad is it going to get? Because I don't think this sounds very good at all for basically anybody. Let's break it down. So starting January 1st next year in 2026, automakers in China will be required to obtain export permits before they can ship pure electric passenger vehicles abroad. So this isn't a rumour, this is genuinely happening, and it comes from China's Ministry of Commerce and the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, otherwise abbreviated as, by people like me, MIT. The official explanation is that the policy will promote the healthy development, quote, of the EV sector. But when you strip away the PR talk, this is generally, it's about control, isn't it? It's quite obvious, and it's the clearest sign yet that Beijing wants to decide exactly who gets to sell EVs overseas, and they've got to get permits basically. So what actually changes, because it sounds very nondescript. There's very little to really grapple with until you dig deeper and you look at the actual the things that were put out. So first, who gets to export? Only automakers and their authorised partners will be able to apply for these export permits. Right now, there are a lot of traders and middlemen who buy Chinese EVs and then they ship them overseas through grey market channels. That has been a big part of the Chinese export surge over the past 2 years. I also remember a time where, probably 12 years ago, I remember being in Norway and a person who I know told me that they just bought this car from China. I remember this, very vivid story, a random electric car, but the pedal wasn't actually a power pedal, it was a speed pedal, so depending on how much you pressed it down, it was weird things, that was a very Chinesey, nondescript, non-branded Chinese car. I think it did have a brand, but nothing that we would recognise these days. And I think it's to stop cars like that leaving the country. So because, if they are sold and they're bad, they can really damage the reputation of China and hence the Chinese electric vehicles. So that's been a big part of the Chinese export surge over the past 2 years. Lots of people, such as Mika Toll, for example, on ebikeschool.com, if you see the YouTube channel there, and he buys a lot of these Chinese vehicles from China and seems to really like them because they're pretty cool looking, pretty quirky things, so understandably so. And if they're cheap, I understand that again. So yeah, that's been a big part of the Chinese export surge over the past couple of years. And under this new system then, most of those exports will probably stop overnight in the beginning of next year. So second, it adds more scrutiny, more delay, more bureaucracy, and they definitely don't need that in China. If the permit process is slow or maybe inconsistent, and let's be honest, it probably will be, that means there'll be friction or higher costs or more uncertainty for companies planning shipments months in advance. I can really see it causing a lot of issues for the recipients, the importers, say, for example, in Europe, or the people in China who are exporting. Number three, it effectively brings EVs under the same licensing system that already applies to petrol and hybrid vehicles. On paper, it's just kind of aligning everything, but in practice, it's a kind of gatekeeper mechanism. Beijing now has a lever to decide who passes through the gate. So I'm not sure that it's exactly going to be like this, and I don't really want to have an opinion on it, but a lot of people are saying it's something similar with digital IDs and that sort of stuff. It's a kind of, if it exists, then it can be the new gate that you've got to get through to get to certain things in society. Now, why is China doing this? There are a few reasons, and some of them actually make a bit of sense. We will go into a couple of them now. So one is brand protection, quality control. Completely legitimate. I understand China has a dodgy reputation from the stuff they were selling 10 years ago. I know, for example, I have taken apart an electric vehicle and seen a variety of cells with literally with cracked nickel strips and patches of nickel strips that are then rusted over the top to patch them. So they're dodgily built, repaired cells, that sort of stuff. So I think it's to kind of stop stuff like that going on, because actually the other side of China, this really high-tech, very good quality side of China, BYD, CATL, MG, things like that, they're incredibly good, really insanely good. The quality is amazing. Anybody who's looked at Xiaomi products, I've taken apart a Xiaomi phone, for example, or Xiaomi, certain parts of electric vehicles from Xiaomi, they're brilliant, incredibly really good. You wouldn't expect. I've seen far worse, let's put it like that. So over the past year, Chinese regulators have been concerned that low quality EVs are being shipped abroad without proper service networks or safety checks or anything, to be honest. I mean, that's putting it mildly. That hurts China's reputation, and when one dodgy model catches fire in another country, it drags every Chinese brand down with it. And, they're trying to fix that. Clearly, this is one of those things they're going to do to try and fix it. Another reason is politics. The EU is already investigating Chinese EV subsidies. It's still to some degree going on, obviously, and could raise tariffs. So China introducing stricter export controls gives it a political shield, and it can say, we're policing our own exports while still keeping the final say over who gets to sell different vehicles abroad. And then there's also the economic angle from the Chinese EV market has been suffering from very, very brutal price wars. Profit margins, they just have collapsed for some companies in China at certain times over the last 2 or 3 years, and smaller startups are being wiped out. Obviously, we kind of know out of about 95, 100 electric vehicle companies in 2023, probably about 5 will exist in the next few years, for example. So a permit system like this gives the government a way to slow that chaos, the messiness and the chaos, to stop hundreds of brands from dumping cheap EVs overseas to simply just stay alive, and basically shafting the rest of the reputation of Chinese electric vehicles. In short, it's kind of about controlling the flood and the reputation, if I'm honest. And here is the problem. That control comes with risk. So if the permit process turns out to be actually quite bureaucratic or political, it could strangle exports. Companies could face weeks or months of delay waiting for approval. Think of it like Brexit, adding that in the middle of it. Trucks, if you remember when Brexit happened, all over the news, trucks up and down the motorway just to get to the Channel crossing. I make that trip a lot across from England and France. I haven't experienced any sort of queues ever, more than an hour to wait for a ferry. But I can imagine it was a bit rough for the people that were doing the truck driving back then. Some might be denied completely. Some of these companies that have got a vehicle, they want to sell it, and they might actually just be denied, and it will cost them a lot of money and time. Smaller car makers, like the ones already struggling, could just disappear entirely. So for Europe, what could it mean? That could mean fewer Chinese electric vehicles arriving, longer wait times for deliveries, inconsistencies for deliveries and that sort of stuff, and less price competition, which is a bad thing because it puts the prices up, obviously. The cheap MGs and BYDs and XPengs that have been flooding into European ports might become just simply harder to get as quickly. You can't just purchase it. It comes, within 2 months. It's already in your country, and you can get your keys and not your keys, but you can get your chip card in a couple of months. So that could push prices up. If the flow slows down, the discount wars we've seen in Europe could basically cool off. EVs might start getting more expensive again, not cheaper. England and Europeans, they genuinely can't really afford that. They're already quite expensive, really, in Europe and the UK. Like I've said before multiple times, 75 to 100% more expensive to buy a BYD than in Australia. It's that wild. So it's mad, isn't it? Yeah, there's another side to this. So for the EVs that make it through, quality and after-sales support might actually improve. That's not a bad thing at all, is it? Beijing wants to ensure that any vehicle that is carrying a Chinese badge overseas represents China and the best of its industry. That means stricter quality standards, better service networks, more accountability for the big players. So it's a kind of monopoly, I suppose, in China, isn't it? 2 or 3, 4, maybe 5 companies will exist in a few years from China. Kind of like Stellantis. You've got all these brands, loads of different brands underneath one company. So basically one person is making the profit, and that's they sell 6 million cars a year, and that's kind of why they can spend. Is it 25 or 30 or 35 million they paid last year to the old CEO of Stellantis? And yes, a huge, big business, big dollars. And that leads us to the bigger question then: who wins here under this system? A really interesting question. This was a fun video to really dig into and research. So the answer is the big guys, obviously BYD, Geely, Chery, SAIC, which is state owned, who already have international factories and distribution networks, who've kind of left China a bit to some degree. They will have no trouble getting export permits. They're too important to block. It's the smaller EV makers, the startups, who are trying to ship a few thousand units abroad, that will struggle, and this could effectively consolidate the Chinese EV export market around the biggest state-backed brands. So that's more control, I suppose, for China. So in some ways, this isn't, just about export control, it's about tightening control of the whole industry. For Europe, this comes at a sensitive time. The EU is already nervous about the scale of Chinese EV imports. Some countries are pushing for tariffs of up to 30% on Chinese cars next year. So when China says, we're adding export permits, it sounds like self-regulation, but it is also a quiet way to retaliate if trade tensions rise. So China now has an easy tool, like a lever to pull, to slow or stop exports to any market it chooses. Let's talk about how bad this could actually get, like a worst case scenario. China could use this permit system that it's kind of created here to restrict exports strategically. For example, limiting shipments to Europe while ramping them up to friendlier regions like Southeast Asia, South America, or the Middle East. This could create a really big bottleneck in Europe's EV supply chain, especially as brands like MG, BYD, and NIO rely very, very heavily on Chinese production. And it could also lead to more factories being built outside of China. Companies kind of sacking China off and moving to Europe. BYD's new Hungarian plant, and also in Turkey, certainly makes a lot more sense in this context, and that's probably why they've been hurrying up. I think they're aware of this. By manufacturing directly inside of Europe, they can also bypass export permits completely, and also the taxes. The same goes for Chery in Spain, and also SAIC in Thailand, and Geely's various European partnerships. In other words, China's export control could accelerate Chinese manufacturing expansion abroad, not just in obviously Europe. But even if it's not weaponized, this new system adds layers of friction that could reshape how EVs are traded globally. And right now, roughly 1 in 3 new electric vehicles sold in Europe comes from China, which is a massive deal. If this rule delays or reduces that flow by even 10 or 15%, then you're kind of looking at real consequences for a lot of people. Fewer models, higher prices, and longer delivery times, because we are not really set up to be able to just take a 15 or 20% loss in deliveries for the next 3 months from China, because companies will just put the prices back up in, say, Volkswagen, for example. So this is the tightening of state control in China, but it also is probably a strategic filter, deciding which brands represent China overseas and which do not, probably for some sort of good, some good reasons. Personally, I think this is a part of a bigger trend. Beijing wants to control the entire EV supply chain, from the lithium mines to the export licenses. They've already dominated the battery materials, and now they're tightening the tap on who gets to sell finished vehicles abroad. I don't think it's a coincidence at all. The question is, will this make global EV trade more stable, or will it make it more tactical, more political? Hello folks, Ben Alexander here. Thank you very much for tuning in. I really appreciate all of the new subscribers lately, also some new members I've got a Patreon as well. You can join on Patreon. There's also a free tier if you just want to go on Patreon and then also not pay because you don't have any money or something like that. Or you can pay a little bit, and it helps me produce these videos. I really do appreciate that. It's also very, very touching. Genuinely, it's just a touching thing when somebody does that. So thank you very much to all of these people on screen. Let me know what you think. Do you see this as China protecting its interests, its reputation, or just kind of using it as a control or a sort of trade weapon? Would you still buy a Chinese EV in Europe or Australia if you knew that Beijing had to approve its export first? Do you kind of condone it? Do you not condone it? Anything you like, say it in the comments below. I will read all the comments, and I'm sure a lot of other people will too. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of the day.